We're learning Parsha Tetzaveh. The bulk of the Parsha discusses the garments that the Kohen Gadol, the high priests, the priests in the temple, the Beis Hamikdash, the Mishkan, the sanctuary, would wear as they did the service. And the Torah describes in great detail many of these garments. The general garments of the Kohen Gadol, the general garments of the Kohen, the regular Kohen, who wore white linen garments. And the Kohen Gadol, in addition to these white linen garments, he also wore special, unique garments that were unique to the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. He would wear the large turban.
Turban.
Large turban. Thank you. The mitznefet, the large turban that he wore, the tunic, and the breastplate with the Urim v'Tumim, which is, interestingly, it's the emblem for Yale University. The Urim v'Tumim.
Really?
Is it Yale or Harvard?
I think it's Yale. Oakton Community College.
I think it's Yale, because when you walk around the Yale campus, you see Hebrew everywhere.
Yes.
It's everywhere.
It's Yale. Yale University has the Urim v'Tumim. Interesting, the Urim v'Tumim represent the wisdom that the Kohen Gadol was granted, the spiritual wisdom that he had, the insight, the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit that he had in giving answers. So maybe that's the reason why Yale University has that emblem representing the wisdom. But I'd like to focus on one of the garments that the Kohen Gadol wore, and that was the robe, the me'il. The Kohen Gadol wore this robe. It was a robe made, it was of turquoise wool, and the bottom edge of this long robe that he wore, this robe, had bells and woolen pomegranates. And the Torah describes bells and pomegranates, pamone zahav. There were tiny little bells and pomegranates that were there. That's fascinating, by the way, is just a few years ago, they found in one of the excavations that were done near the Temple Mount, they found a tiny bell.
Wow.
What else could it be? If someone's jewelry, it may be. It was from this Kohen Gadol hem. It's a tiny little golden bell, exactly as it's described. Fascinating. But that's what he wore. He wore this robe that had the golden bells and the pomegranates. And the Torah describes in chapter 28, verse 35, it should be on Aaron when he performs the service. It should sound. Its sound should be heard when he enters the holy place before God, when he leaves, so that he will not die. So the commentators explain very basically that this was an indicator. The Kohen Gadol is approaching. The high priest is coming. The high priest is coming. It was like an indicator. Here comes the high priest. The Kohen Gadol, by the way, Kohen Gadol, that's where the Hawaiian term is of the Big Kahuna.
Oh, come on.
Come on, that's true.
Oh, really?
It's true.
Okay.
What is a Big Kahuna? The big guy in charge, the Kohen Gadol. That's where it comes from. You know the Big Kahuna, where it's from.
Okay.
Literally, yeah. And so the Kohen Gadol, he was entered here. Here comes the Kohen Gadol. Here comes Big Kahuna. But there's an issue. The Rebbe asks a question on this, that the Kohen in general is the one who represents service of God. The Kohen Gadol is the ultimate role model of what it means to serve God. There's a verse in regards to Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Hanavi. Here he has a vision of God. That God tells him the presence of God is not necessarily in the raging fire, in the earthquakes, in the tornadoes. In other words, the presence of God, of course, of God's presence is everywhere. But the ultimate representation of God is in the thin, quiet whisper. Called Momodaka. You're able to, and you see the wisdom of an individual, see the greatness of a person, not when they're making a big tumult, but when there's that quietness that's there, the simplicity. If that's the case, the Kohen Gadol, I mean, truly should represent that humility of walking into the temple without the bells and whistles. Without the here I am, here I come. I'm the Kohen Gadol. Here I am and here I'm coming. I'm entering. What? And it's a divine command. The Kohen Gadol, and for that matter, the Kohen, especially the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, is not just coming on his own. A Kohen is the representative of the people. He's their agent. The Kohen Gadol, the big kahuna, he certainly represents, and especially when he enters the Holy of Holies, when he enters that realm, he enters representing every single Jew. What does it mean? What are the bells and pomegranates representing? On the bottom of his robe. Interestingly, the Talmud tells us that what does a pomegranate represent? We eat pomegranates on Rosh Hashanah, and it's to remind us that we are filled with mitzvahs, like a pomegranate is filled with seeds. But the context of that phrase is the Jewish people are like pomegranates. How so? Even the empty ones amongst you are filled with mitzvahs, like a pomegranate is filled with seeds. A pomegranate is unlike other fruit. An apple is filled with fruit. An orange is filled with fruit. A pomegranate, it's cavernous. You open it up, it's empty. It's like a shell, but it's filled with seeds. So too, you have Jews that are quote unquote empty. Even such empty people, even such empty, quote unquote empty Jews, there's no such thing as empty. They're filled with mitzvahs, like a pomegranate is filled with seeds. Like a person once came to the Rebbe and was somewhat critical because, in the 60s, when the Rebbe emphasized the concept of reaching out to others and connecting with them and encouraging them to do mitzvahs, it was accepted somewhat critically by many other groups in the Jewish community. But why are you quote unquote wasting time with Jews who are not observing Torah mitzvahs? Why? And so I don't understand. This person once asked the Rebbe, I don't understand. If the Talmud describes these pomegranates about the empty Jews, if they're so empty, how could you be describing as filled with mitzvahs? They're empty. And the Rebbe told this person, I always had the same question. If they're filled with mitzvahs, how could they be considered empty?
They're waiting to be planted.
This man looked at them. These are empty. They're empty. How could they be filled with mitzvahs? And the Rebbe looked at it the other way around. They're filled with mitzvahs. How could you consider them empty?
Uh-huh.
So that's the
There you
point.
go.
So the Kohen Gadol had to represent every Jew, even the quote unquote empty ones. But then there's another level of empty, the bells. The Talmud says, when you have a tzedakah pushka, you have a pushka, a tzedakah can. What kind of tzedakah can makes noise?
Half empty.
When you have it, not even if it's half empty, it makes. If you have 1 or 2 or 3 coins in the tzedakah can and you shake it up, it makes more noise. The more filled it is, the less noise it makes. Someone who is filled with true service of God, they're not making any noise. Who's the one who's making the noise? Look at me, look at what I achieved. It's the empty ones. Also, the person who is seeking attention is the one who's making the noise. Or a person who is swimming, they don't make any, there's no noise when they swim. Who is the person who makes noise when they're in the water? A person who is drowning, a person who is thrashing in the water is making the noise. So in all situations, the noisemaker is someone who is in a grave situation. And they're on the fringe of that robe. The Kohen Gadol must always remember, I am not representing myself. I'm representing every single Jew. And even that Jew who's on the fringe, even that Jew who's quote unquote empty, I must remember they're filled with mitzvahs. Even that Jew who is thrashing and making all the noise. I have to, the identity of the Kohen Gadol becomes that identity. When they hear the Kohen Gadol, when they hear those bells ringing, they know the Kohen Gadol has entered. In other words, that personifies, that's not just something on the fringe. That personifies the big kahuna, the one who represents and does not forget any Jew. The one who is the representative, the agent of, yes, even that Jew who makes a lot of noise. Aaron, the Kohen Gadol, enters with that Jew. And if he doesn't enter with that Jew, that's what the Torah says, wear this so you shall not die. Cautioning, the Kohen Gadol must never forget such a Jew. This is the message of the Kohen Gadol. Today is an auspicious day for me, personally. Today, I conclude saying Kaddish for my mother of blessed memory, Mazel Bas Rab Nissim, which will conclude saying Kaddish at Mincha, God willing. But it's a time which we reflect upon the neshama, and that the neshama should be blessed, or the soul should be blessed, to be elevated on high, and to continue on greater elevations. One of the unique qualities about my mother of blessed memory, first of all, joy, filled with joy, always filled with joy, bringing joy to others. But even later, in her later days, where sadly she suffered from dementia in her later days, later years, and when you know someone suffering from such a debilitating disease, it takes away everything from you.
Yeah.
So visiting her, I can just share that visiting her, you see people who are in such a state, and it rips your heart apart, seeing people in such a state. And people, they're not knowing what they're saying and what they're responding to and what they're reacting. And some are are crying in pain, some are yelling. And the one thing I can say, what the nurses always said about my mother whenever I saw her there, she had a smile on her face. And people are retain something which is most familiar to them. And there were phrases that each one would say, repeat their phrases. But one phrase my mother would always repeat to people who would come and see her, people who would attend to her. She would always respond to them, God bless you. God bless you. And like, wow, if we were to be reduced to one phrase that remains in our subconscious, that becomes our identity, one that is of giving, I pray that should be my phrase. That we should emphasize again and again the opportunity of sharing with others and blessing others. May God bless you. That becomes our phrase, that becomes our mantra, and that becomes something so ingrained in us. Like the Kohen Gadol, that he must enter and not think about himself, he must think about every single person, even the noisemaker, that nudnik of the noisemaker. The Kohen Gadol enters with him. We should internalize that concept of blessing others. And so may God bless each and every one of you. And may God bless my mother's neshama, Mazel Bas, Reb Nisim, and Nejma should be having an aliyah and neshama. And with that, we should prepare ourselves with the greatest joy, preparing ourselves now for the holiday of Purim, one of giving, which is a major difference. And holiday of Purim, we dress up. Lahavdil, there are other occasions when our culture dresses up. On Halloween, Lahavdil. And it's also associated with food, but it's a much different, diametrically opposed. On Halloween, kids get dressed up and they go from door to door asking for treats. In fact, trick or treat. Either you give me a treat or I give you a trick. On Purim, we get dressed up and we train and educate our children that you must go and give goods and treats and tzedakah to others. That is a fundamental difference. And so they have nothing in common. Absolutely nothing in common. And the essential difference is we get dressed up and we give shmushlach manot, we give gifts to others, gifts of food, those who are in need, gifts of tzedakah. So let's give and keep on giving, and that have true and greater joy. Have a wonderful day.
I have a question, but first, may your mother's memory serve as a beautiful, elevating blessing.
Amen.
Question, practical question. On Yom Kippur in Jerusalem, it's usually very hot, 85, 90 degrees, could even be hotter on Yom Kippur in Jerusalem. How could anyone wear 8 layers of garments? Was it a miracle that the Kohen Gadol just didn't sweat, or did the Kohen Gadol just endure 8 layers of garments when it's 90 degrees or 95 degrees in Jerusalem on Yom Kippur? How could anyone wear 8 layers of garments?
I'll tell you a famous line from Rabbi Dr. Abraham Twersky of blessed memory, who just recently passed away. He says that, I don't know if it was about him, but he says that he tells a story that one day someone walked over to him, and maybe it was Jerusalem, and he wore the traditional Hasidic garb, long black coat, the hat, and in a hot, sweltering summer day, this is how you dress. So a woman looks at him and says, "You are insult, a shanda, a charpa. How could you wear this? You are insulting our people. This is why there's anti-Semitism. This is what it is. Look at how you dress." So he says to her, "Excuse me, ma'am, I'm Amish." She said, I am so sorry, sir.
So
I have such respect for you, holding up your traditions and all this. Haknish can Chinik, he says to her. I don't know if Hakna Chinik. So whether it was miraculous or not miraculous, but yes, that's what he, it's
having fun.
he wore all those layers. It's not something when you're wearing them and this is what you wear, you're not even thinking about it. You're not even thinking about it. That's what we wear. But this year, by the way, Purim in Yerushalayim. This year is unique. It's a 3-day Purim this year in Yerushalayim. Because since Purim, we celebrate on Friday.
Yes.
In Yerushalayim, it's usually the next day. It's Shushan Purim.
Oh.
Shushan Purim is Shabbos.
So they push it to Sunday.
And so on Shabbos, there are many restrictions. You don't listen to the Megillah because you would accidentally carry the Megillah somewhere on Shabbos.
Yeah.
So what happens on Shabbos is, on Shabbos they say Al Hanisim. On Shabbos they read the special portion for Purim on Shabbos of the Torah. The Megillah they read this Friday. The gifts to the poor they give this Friday.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But Mishloach Manot they give on Sunday.
Okay.
And the Su'udah, the great Su'udah, the grand feast is on Sunday.
Oh, really?
I remember 1981, the Rebbe encouraged them that since those who are in Jerusalem are uniting with those outside of Jerusalem and reading the Megillah on the previous day on Purim, we should do something to unite with them on Sunday. And so therefore we should also have something special on Sunday, a special feast on Sunday, and also give gifts to others on Sunday as well, just to unite, a symbol of Jewish unity, the oneness of the Jewish people.
Do they follow Shushan because it's a walled city?
Yes.
Yeah. One thought, Rabbi, you talked about the small bells. I know when you pull out the Torah, they also got small bells on them.
Yes, same concept.
What about Jews living in a walled city? There are still a few walled cities in England. The city of York is a walled city.
It's the walled cities that were walled in Israel, the walled cities that were in the time of Joshua.
Oh, so York, if there are Jews in York, it does not count.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, Jews in York certainly count, and especially Jews in New York.
I don't go. They have their own problems. Okay.
Have a great day, Rabbi.